Hey everyone, and welcome to the #1 podcast for everything iPhone and iPad. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/iMore for your free audiobook download. We are talking iPad mini. We are continuing our iOS 6 Q&A, so get ready. This is the iMore Show.
It's July 4th, 2012. I'm Georgia, and joining us today is 9 to 5 Mac's ace reporter himself, Marc Gurman. Hey, Marc.
Hi, Georgia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Sure.
Also joining us is the Next Web's news and Apple editor, Matthew Panzarino. Hey, Matt.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am doing wonderfully. And editor-in-chief of iMore.com himself, Rene Ritchie.
Hey Georgia, how are you?
I am still well.
Yeah, you get asked that like over and over again because it's impolite not to return the question, but then you're doing it almost staccato at this point.
Right. I think that next time I'm going to answer something different each time someone answers me. So my mood will just, it'll be like I'm bipolar.
Decreasingly good every time you're asked.
I'm wonderful now that you asked. I'm horrible now that you asked, Rene.
Nice.
And of course, I'd like to say first, hello to the chat room for joining us live.
Hey,
hello, chat room people.
The chat room's looking handsome tonight, if I can say that myself.
They are. And just wanted the chat room to know that Matt has been asked to be Twitter flamed. So go ahead.
All right. No, trolls. You didn't ask for flames. You asked for trolls.
Oh, sorry. Do both.
All right.
Both.
Troll away, folks.
We will find out if it's only me that happens to.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's get started. We are going to be discussing, we're going to have a Q&A on iOS 6, and also let's start off with the 7-inch iPad. And Marc, you have a story right now up that, yes, coming, shipped October, mass-produced. So, rumors true? Which we were flamed. When we put that out, we were completely flamed on that, Marc.
Well, Rene put that out first, that, the iPad mini 7-inch, right? It's coming later this year.
By minutes, I could hear you typing in the background as I posted.
Yeah. So, yeah, after he posted it, I heard the same thing. I didn't hear the pricing, didn't hear the screen resolution, but yeah, it's coming in the fall, according to my sources. But, Rene posted it, and, you guys are great. And then...
We paid you to say that. Thank you.
And then you see...
Rene posted it, so that's my out if it ends up not happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all my fault.
Oh, there we go. That's smart.
No. I mean...
Matt threw Rene under the bus. If it's wrong, it's all Rene's
If it's wrong,
fault.
he's going to back it up over me again.
That's what I do. I just link back to Rene anytime I mention it. And then that way, I can just be like, hey, dude, look, he snookered me.
Bamboozled.
No,
if it's right, it was me. If it's wrong, it was Rene. That's exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal posted it last night as well. We're only waiting on Reuters at this point. Yeah. So I think it's very likely, but I think it comes down to what are they going to price it at? What are the features going to be? What's going to be unique about it? Why are people going to buy that over the Kindle? Why are people going to buy that over the Nexus? I mean, Apple's point of having this integrated ecosystem, I think that's good enough for people who live in this Apple world. I think that's going to be, a good purchase for them. But we'll see how Apple markets it in the end. Is it going to be called the iPad mini? Is it going to look like an iPad 3? There's still a lot to be determined, and there's still a lot to be seen. So we'll have to see. But I think at this point, it's pretty clear that we're going to get it this year.
Okay, Marc, I'm going to ask you the question, though, because we discussed a lot about why would Apple come... And at first, even, I was like, really, Rene? That we said would never happen is going to happen. So, Marc, saying that it is true and it's coming, why would Apple decide to... they're the head of the market. Why would Apple decide to come out with a 7-inch iPad?
When Steve Jobs, I think that was in late 2010, said, it's a dumb idea. People have to, cut off parts of their fingers to be able to use the thing. I think when he was saying that, it was pretty clear that Apple was dominating. When they announced the iPad 2, they had 90% of the tablet market share with that 10-inch iPad. I think with the Kindle Fire, it's been pretty clear that there is a market for the smaller tablet. I mean, they existed since the first iPad came out, but they never meant anything. I think when Amazon did it, it started to mean something. And, they only pushed forward with the 7-inch iPad. I mean, they've been developing one, they've been toying with one for years, even prior to the first one launching. But I think that decision for them to move forward with it and release it this year only came after the Kindle Fire hit and when it started to be popular and people really saw a market for the smaller tablet. So I think the Kindle Fire and now the Nexus 7, I think it's a big push for Apple to move forward. And after a couple years, I also think it's the right time for them to start expanding the iPad like they expanded the iPods. It's interesting to see, though, why they're expanding the iPad and not the iPhone. Like, they've been recycling old models after they launch a new model on the iPhone side.
Right.
So it's interesting to see why they're doing that with the iPad, and they did it with the iPod, but, they're staying away from that scheme with the phone.
Do you think that it's more the size or the price that's going to be more important? Like, do you think that it's because it's a 7-inch in comparison to a 10-inch, or do you think that it's just the cheaper of to have it at a price where it's going to undercut, selling it to be like a Nexus or the Kindle?
Yeah, I think it would have to do more with the pricing. I mean, the smaller is nice, and people clearly want a smaller tablet, like you could see from the success of the Kindle Fire right now and what people are already saying about the Nexus 7. But yeah, I think the price is the key differentiator. And, the price goes with the screen size. So I think that's how it's going to work out. And I think people are going to buy these up. I think it's going to be a hit product at that $200 price point or $250 price point.
Right. Rene, do you think that anyone, say that they come out with something that's $200, 7 inches, is anyone going to be able to compete? And then how would they compete?
It'll be tough. I mean, I think I mentioned it on MacBreak that if you walk into an airplane and you see a couple people with iPads, and there's usually a few people with iPads, but there's also a few with Kindles, some with Nooks, some with maybe a Fire, maybe even a Playbook, rarely. Apple would like their business too, and right now people are choosing between cheap and small or an iPad, and if suddenly they can choose between cheaper, smaller, and an iPad, Apple will gain back certain percentage of that market share. We've seen Apple produce. Originally, people were amazed that Apple could produce an iPad for $500. Now the iPad 2 is $400. Apple said that other people could only compete by lowering the price.
Which they did.
Yeah, which they did. But now Apple can make a $500 iPad at profit. Competitors couldn't do that. They had to make a smaller one. So how much cheaper can Apple make a smaller one? I'm betting they could even do margin at an iPad this small and this cheap.
Okay, Matt, go ahead, answer the question.
That's just wrong.
Very funny.
Don't feel any stress. I'm a stress specialist. Don't worry about that.
So go ahead. What's the question? Give me the question again, because I just came back online.
Well, what we're discussing is the reasons that Apple would have decided to go with a 7-inch iPad, and then which you can jump in on, but also how does Google and everyone else compete if they can put out a 7-inch iPad at a $200 price margin?
I don't think that there's any super secret plan for Apple as far as the 7-inch iPad goes. If they think
can I say something to that though? If it's like no one else can do it though. Like so far, no one's been able to compete with Apple. So yeah.
Right, but the thing is that everybody's working on it from the hardware end forward, and Apple's working from the ecosystem end backwards, and they always have. And so everybody's like, "Oh, the Kindle Fire came out, and it's not very good, and it wasn't that successful." Well, the problem is that Amazon only has portions of the ecosystem. Like they're not, a bunch of stuff's not available in Canada, overseas. So unless people have the apps and have the media, they're not going to want a 7-inch tablet.
So tell me a little bit. I'm interested in this ecosystem forward, backward thing. Can you explain what exactly that means and why Apple's doing it in a way that is profitable for them, whereas others are not really competing?
Well, by the time 2007 rolled around, when Apple introduced the iPhone, they had just an immense ecosystem of, music, digital delivery, credit cards. Everything was basically primed. The pump was primed. By the time that they came out with their mobile computers, which were like the right way to display that content, to access that content. And by the time 2008 rolled around, when they introduced the App Store, they had all the elements in place. They had them in place for almost like 6 years already. So the problem with it is that, you go with somebody like Google, who's like, an internet services company. They should know better, right? They grew up on internet services. They provide services to people free of charge, with advertising, all that stuff. They know the value of services. So they feel that, these services are enough to sell a device. Unfortunately, it's not. You got to have movies, you got to have music, you got to have books, you got to have all this stuff, which is what Google I/O is about this year.
You got to have the experience. We had that problem, right? Android came out and people were saying they were bringing specs to an experience fight. And then Amazon came out, and in the US, they were trying at least to bring content to an experience fight, but they were limited. The Kindle was a paperweight outside of the US, and the Nexus 7, I don't think it's going to be much more than a paperweight outside the US and maybe a few spots internationally. And
so what do you mean by only a paperweight? Like, why? What is it missing?
They don't have content. Like Apple, it's very hard to get content deals internationally. Even Apple has struggled, but because they had iTunes for so long and they've been very vigorous and they've been successfully building off their momentum, they now have the App Store and the iTunes Music Store in tons of countries. I don't know if, Mark, you remember the amount, but I think it's over 100 countries at this point, and no one else can do that. Most other countries, we still don't have Amazon MP3 in Canada, and they promised it to us in 2008. And if you buy a tablet and you can't do anything with it, you get bored. That tablet goes in a drawer and you don't invest in that platform.
Okay,
there was a report today.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone said the UK Nexus 7 wouldn't get TV shows, movies, or books or something today. Saw that on
Yep. And that's just
Inquisitor,
evidence that this stuff is hard to do. I mean, these deals are not easy to cut. And I mean, they managed to cut some deals in the US, which is what Google I/O was like, oh yeah, we've got all this stuff. But all that stuff where? Here in the Western United States, in the Eastern, it's just basically like, good headline or a good bullet point. But you don't look at it in the global reality. You realize that Apple's been doing this for a very long time.
And look at their sales internationally. I mean, their sales in China alone, Brazil, all the emerging market sales, they're selling as many iPhones, if not more, external to the US now. Right.
So, okay. Mark, if you are Google's CEO, you're heading the project on getting a tablet out there to, take a huge chunk of the market from Apple. What exactly do you do? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think, the price is the only way to do it. Like we see it's a $199 tablet, and Apple starts at $399 with the iPad too. I think that $200 difference might be enough to get consumers to push towards Google. I mean, Google's never been a consumer brand in terms of, technology, hardware products, and Apple always has. So, they have the market until now. And there's no reason someone's going to pick Google over Apple at the same price. So I think that big price differentiator is the only way to get new customers. But, with these types of devices, it really comes down to the content consumption. And Apple obviously, owns that content market for these digital devices. So I think the only way
there's no way for them to beat Apple on content right now as it is. They might be the same. So if you're saying that price point is the only way that they can go about it with Apple, say that Apple's coming out with a $200, $250 tablet, how is Google going to compete with that and still make a profit?
Well, they're not making a profit.
Undercut themselves?
Well, they're already selling this tablet at cost. I mean, I think we saw that already revealed. I forget who put that up, but they are taking the money. They are marketing it. They are selling it in their store, which is actually really bad for Android platform partners because they won't be able to afford to do this. Google is hugely subsidized by advertising. And for example, Samsung and HTC and other partners won't be able to sell tablets this cheaply, but Apple might be able to do it. And I think that overall, that's the danger here, is that Apple will be better and cheaper. And I think that's the Tim Cook magic.
Right. I mean, I talked to Patrick Brady, who's the director of partner engineering at Google I/O. And I was talking to him about the Nexus 7, and, basically this thing is being produced, at cost and below if it gets sold outside the Google Play Store. So I was, it's definitely an aggressive move, and they have to be aggressive. I'd say that it's hands down something they've got to do. But that margin, that hardware margin, will allow Apple more freedom to sell this device and make a profit on it and benefit from the ecosystem and all the credit cards and everything. And it's just not a technique Apple has to do, and it's not one they will do. So if people were talking about like the 7-inch iPad, you've got to know that they're going to have a margin on that. They're going to be able to sell that for profit, period, right out of the gate.
I have a question about that I'm getting back to, and more on the Apple end, is that the last we heard, it's running iOS 6 for iPad. It's just smaller. And I still have concerns about touch targets when you have the smaller interface, because the iPad now, it's arguably the touch targets are big and maybe they could be shrunken down, but I don't know how successful that interface will be. And I don't think that it's really good to have a third screen size either and have triple binaries start hitting the App Store. So I think Apple will go that way. I'm just not sure how.
Yeah, it'll be the same PPI, but I am also concerned about touch target sizes. I don't think that just porting an iPad 1 app, theoretically, 1X app to a 7-inch iPad is going to give you a best user experience possible.
And it keeps around, like, as much as the 1X is being kept around for the iPhone 3G and the iPad 2, this will be a brand new device keeping 1X, proudly there for the next generation.
Right. It's going to look terrible in comparison. I'm serious. I mean, it will be slightly higher, or slightly easier to go off and go like, oh, okay, it's okay because it's $199. But it's going to look terrible if it's the same PPI. Because remember, you don't get the increase in density going to a smaller size if you're going to keep the same PPI. So
the original iPhone screen resolution.
Right. It's going to look worse than the Nexus 7, which I have a really hard time thinking about that. I just don't know how that's going to fly. I don't know if that's the way Apple's going to go with it. I mean, I know Gruber says like, oh, they're just going to cut the sheets larger, and that is how LCD manufacturing works. I've done a lot of research on it, and it basically, they go through the machine, they go into a breaker, and they can break them at any size. They can score and break them at any size they want. But unfortunately, I just don't know if that, even at a lower cost, is going to compete well against like the Nexus 7 or the Kindle Fire 2, which will be out later this year.
And we heard a rumor too that Apple had at least been experimenting with Retina on that iPad, but I can't believe that would be a cheap panel at this point, because it's not a cheap panel on the iPad 3, and making it smaller and that crazy resolution.
But remember, they make 1, 2, 3 different, well, now 4 different Retina devices, but let's call it 3 at the same resolution, because the Retina MacBook Pro is not the same resolution, right? So this is not the same panel. But the iPad, iPhone 4, and iPhone 4S are all that same PPI Retina, 326 or whatever it is.
Yep.
So the same economies of scale apply there. You could take those panels and score and break them larger as well. So you could take an iPhone 4 or the iPads and cut it smaller.
Or the cheaper iPad panel, which isn't IPS. Sorry, the iPod Touch panel, which isn't IPS and doesn't have the same...
IPS. I think it'll be IPS. It won't be non-IPS if they go in the iPad. But, I mean, if you take a Retina iPad 3 screen and break it smaller, you're still benefiting from economies of scale. It's just a matter of how much the volume that they produce so far has affected their production costs, whether or not there's going to be that margin there. That's why I was saying, if it's Retina, I have a hard time not seeing it be $299.
Yeah, I think that is high for where Apple wants to go, because they want an iPod Mini this market.
Right, but if anybody...
are there any rumors that it's going to be Retina?
We heard that they were trying, but I mean, they were trying to do the iPad 2 at Retina and they couldn't do it. So what they try to do one generation sometimes slips to the next.
Right.
Yeah, that would be shocking, and at a price point that would be competing against the, to kill the sales of the Kindle and the Nexus.
But I mean, look at when the MacBook Air came out, people thought it was an expensive netbook, and now how many years later, no one can really produce it at that cost still. Apple's been able, because they're so focused, and like Matt said, they're already using these panels. If Apple orders 100 million iPad minis over the course of the next couple of years, that's an incredible component advantage to Apple. Well, everyone else, I mean, Samsung is great, it's variety, but every one of those panels means, different components. They don't get the same economies.
Right. Now, here, let me throw you a total curveball just to change the subject for the heck of it. Who thinks that this is going to be 16:9 instead?
I don't. We heard it's the same as the iPad 2, but you never know.
New iPhone's going to be longer, theoretically.
Yep.
16:9.
Theoretically longer.
Why wouldn't they go 16:9 with that, and then the year after, you've got 2 16:9 devices and a 4:3, but it's still 2/3 of your market is roughly the same proportions. So if you're designing for the iPhone, then those same principles apply to designing for the iPad Mini.
Would iPad 4 be 16:9 too? I mean, we start seeing a sweep of the line the way Apple started doing with the MacBooks.
right? I don't know if the iPad 4 or like the larger iPad would go 16:9 because I think 4 to 3 is right for it. But yeah, maybe, right? But I think 4 to 3 is right for this size. But for the smaller tablet, it's movies, it's books, it's consumption of, vertical content or horizontal content. And I think that's why the Nexus 7 will be successful to a degree because it's a good form factor for watching movies or reading books and that kind of thing. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it. I was thinking about it today. I'm like, be a good time to do it if they were.
I have another question. I wonder, I know for sure there are people who want a cheaper iPad, but I think there are people who want a smaller iPad. I think for some people, 10 inches is just too big to do what they want to do. And the iPhone and even a 4-inch iPhone may not be big enough. And I think it's similar to the 4-inch iPhone. Right now people choose between a 3.5-inch iPhone and a 4-inch or 4-inch and bigger non-iPhone. And Apple still gets about half their business in the US. But if they could choose an iPhone that's 4 inches, maybe they get 55%. Maybe they get 60%. And I think in tablets it's the same. Apple has a huge share, but some people will choose a smaller device. And if Apple also has that, they might buy the 32 gigabyte version or the 64 gigabyte version, which has, and I think that's true still, right, Mark? The margins on those are way bigger than the margins on the baseline.
Right, because it's $100 difference between the different storage capacities, but it doesn't cost them $100 to double the storage.
No, yes.
Yeah, a few bucks, maybe.
Yeah, no one's buying $100 RAM sticks.
Right. So yeah, it's bigger margins on the higher capacity.
Yeah, I still don't think that it is more about the price than it is about the size.
For geeks on the size, like I would buy a 64 gigabyte iPad mini in a heartbeat.
Will there be one?
Well, yeah, but are any of us here not going to buy the 7-inch iPad? Like we kind of.
I have to.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. My wife has an iPad. She has my old iPad too, right? And it's heavy. She doesn't like it because it's heavy. She's holding the baby with one arm. She wants to read and watch movies and stuff. So when I brought home all of these, Google gives out like all of this stuff to you, right? When you go to anything that they hold. But
he's got the glasses in his back pocket from when he jumped out of the plane.
I do have my pre-order glass. It's right here. See? But if you, awesome. She took a look at this and she said, "Oh, can I have one of those?" I'm like, "What do you need one of these for? You have an iPad, But she's like, "Oh, it's light and it's small and I can hold it easy, So I mean, I think there's definitely a market for it, and it's not just geeks. It's not just people going, "Oh, I want all the iPads,"
Right. Which is, I guess, it is less cumbersome by size, definitely by weight for sure.
And you could put it in a jacket pocket, which I think is huge for some people who just want to go out and not have to carry a Merce with them.
Yeah, I don't know about sticking in your back pocket.
No, your jacket pocket.
Your jacket pocket, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think that if they can get both, I don't see how anyone can compete. I think that it's going to be people that dislike Apple on principle.
No, but that's always a market. You're absolutely right. There's always going to be a not Apple market. Arguably, Samsung has made a fortune on the not Apple market. There's always going to be a winner there.
Right. Hate Apple. Hate Apple and buy this.
You got to remember too, though, that like, here's the tablet market as it stands right here, right? But there's all this overhead. There's all this, right? Where nobody has filled this yet. So like iPads are the most, and then like Android tablets are way down here. But there's still all of this to go. So it's not just like Apple has to eat up this too. It can go this way. Yeah. So I think there's definitely room for like the Nexus 7 or something like that. And it doesn't have to be like an anti-Google or anti-Apple thing. It just can be like there's room in the market. There's
room in the market, but
no saturation.
In the end, they have to do something better. They have to grasp something that Apple has not already taken a hold of or beat them at Apple's own game, which is kind of hard when Apple's been in it for so much longer than anyone else has.
Yeah, that still surprises me. It surprises me that it's taken so long to catch up in tablets, especially tablet applications. And I know we've seen the Surface now and we've seen the Nexus 7, but still Apple is so far ahead in software for these devices that I think that's going to be the next big hurdle.
People talk about the 7-inch tablet market, right? And I think what you said is right, Rene. It's like, people talk a lot about, the 7-inch tablet market. They got to get into that. There is no 7-inch tablet market. There is some 7-inch tablets, but nobody has established a market for them. So in reality, Apple is not entering a market to compete with the Kindle Fire or the Nexus 7. They're entering a market that has not yet been claimed. Nobody has claimed it yet. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity for them. And I think they see that there could be a toehold there. It's just a matter of whether or not they think that market is worth going for.
because they want to be
Yeah.
able to sell 100 million more of something else. I mean, the iPhone is doing great, the iPad is doing great, but they want the next product that'll sell 100 million things. And just like you said, I mean, they walked into what had previously been occupied by tablet PC with handles, and now they're walking into what's previously been occupied by small ebook readers. And
Right.
they might feel that they can. It was Apple. Matt said this really well. Tim Cook wants to sell more stuff. And we know that Johnny Ive wants to make better products. And if Tim Cook feels like he could sell 100 million and Johnny Ive feels like he could make a better product than what exists now, Apple will absolutely do it.
Before we switch gears, I just want to thank Audible for sponsoring today's show. You can go to audiblepodcast.com/iMore and get a free audiobook download. In fact, I encourage you to do so. It helps support the iMore show. It gets you a great free book. It's a win-win situation. If you're not familiar with Audible, Audible is books brought to glorious audio life. They have fantastic readers, sometimes the author, often well-known voice actors, sometimes well-known actors, period. They read the books to you. And this is important because, for example, I spend all day staring at computer screens. My eyes get tired. It's very difficult for me to fit in reading a lot of books. But while I'm working, I can very easily listen to them. In fact, because I can listen to them, that's the only way I've managed to get through books anymore. I used to have long commutes. It used to take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to work every day. I used to listen to audiobooks voraciously while I traveled. Now I work at home, but I can listen to books just as voraciously while I work. They have recent bestsellers. They have classics. You can get anything that you watch on TV that is based on a book. More often than not, you can find it on Audible. Game of Thrones, Hunger Games, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. It is all there. A couple of months ago, I listened to Tony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential and Raw. He's famous, well-known celebrity cook from the Food Network and Travel Network. He does No Reservations. He used to do a cook's tour or a chef's tour. And they were absolutely amazing, not just to read, but to listen to hear in his own words. And that is a feeling that doesn't go away. Every time you listen to an Audible book, whether it's a book about Apple or just a great novel that you've always wanted to read but didn't have time for, there's time to listen to it. So check out Audible. Check out audiblepodcast.com/iMore. Once again, you support the show. You get a free audiobook download. Everybody's happy.
Well, let's head on down to some questions that people have for iOS 6 Q&A. I'm going to field them to different people. If you don't happen to know, go ahead, field them to someone else. And please jump in if you have something else to say to someone else. Go. But I'm going to send this one first to Mark. So here it is. Stereoed Rizzo says, since Apple now fully makes their own map apps on iOS, can we expect to see it go onto Mac OS? Or will Apple create their own Maps website to compete head-on with Google Maps?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. They have all these databases now, like the 2D databases, and they started working on the 3D flyover. Works great on the touchscreen iOS. I see it coming to the Mac eventually. Like there's this whole convergence between iOS and OS 10. So I think maybe in the next few years, seeing it on the Mac is very likely. But going to the web, competing with the Google Maps website, not so much. I don't really see it on the web.
What's the question though? How does Apple send, like right now you could email Google Map directions to somebody and they can open it in a web browser, and we don't know what's going to happen with Apple. Although I think they're using Google Maps. They're going to keep using Find My Friends, Google Maps.
I don't think they care. I don't think they give a rat's ass about what happens on the web. I mean, I think that maybe
How do I find my iPhone, Matt?
Right. Eventually they may package something like, imagine Instagram, but with a map in it, right? Yeah. They may package it that way and use their own maps. But in reality, I don't think that they care. I mean, the web is not where Apple is competing with anybody. On their device, they're able to customize it more. I mean, their deal with Google was onerous. I mean, not only was it expensive, but it was also, bound by a lot of rules and restrictions of what they could and couldn't do.
And it gave Google a lot of competing, like it gave Google access to tremendous iOS data.
Absolutely. Gave them access to tons of user data that Apple could be leveraging themselves and using as a competitive advantage. So in the end, I think that they don't really care about what happens on the web besides offering users a good user experience end to end, which is why they might do that sort of packaged web view thing. But I don't know if it's a priority.
Here's an interesting question. I mean, originally only TeleAtlas and Navtech had maps, which became TomTom and Nokia, and Google basically licensed them and then went and redrew them. Apple is now licensing TomTom maps. They would have to license TomTom web tiles, unless, Mark, you happen to know if Apple is using jetpacks to run around all the streets and remap everything and Street View it.
Oh, I don't know about that. No, I don't know about Street View, but I know C3 Technologies, which they bought late last year. It was like October or late September, I think. They did some Street View work, but that hasn't been implemented in iOS 6 yet. I don't know why. Maybe they're still working on that. But.
Yeah, and there are other third-party providers that provide Street View. I wouldn't be surprised to see that be an iPhone day of announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did Apple just do this though to stick it to Google so keeps Google off of their own hardware? As you said, Matt, they don't really want to make money off of it. It's free, so yeah. Why even bother?
Yeah,
it's an expensive thing for them to do. Like, is this just a personal vendetta?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that the data has value, and I think that they want that data for themselves. But I also think that there are a couple of things that they were prevented from doing before with Google Maps in regards to integrating it with their OS and in regards to collecting data from users that they wanted to be able to do. And I think they were blocked from doing a couple of things because of Google's rules, and they didn't want it to do it. And then on top of that, you have like this icing of get off of our system. We want
get off my lawn.
Yeah, seriously, they want as little visible, Google fingers as possible. Email will always be there. Google search will probably be there for a long time until a competitor comes along that looks decent. But they are disenfranchising Google. They are removing their name. They are pushing them out. They are convincing people to use Siri for more common requests that they may have had to Google before. And that will continue to expand. As they expand Siri as an information service, it will take away page views. It will keep people in the Apple UI and experience more fully.
They're concierging everything.
Well, I think that Apple saw Google getting they're a huge megalith in information gathering. I think it's more, and again, this might be more me, Rene, than anything else, but I think that it's more about keeping this megalith smaller so that they don't become, at a certain stage of gathering data, the amount that they can do with that is huge, and it would be very difficult for them to compete. So I think that them undercutting Google at the same time as keeping them off the OS is worthwhile. But do they actually want to take care of the data? Do they want the data themselves? I don't know.
I mean, we used to talk about that iOS users have a huge advantage because we get Google apps and Microsoft apps and Apple apps. And Android and Windows do not get Apple apps. I mean, Windows Phone do not get Apple apps. But that's a two-edged sword. Apple has been dependent upon Google at the same time. And I think, to Matt's point, the independence, or as Mark said before, the independence is very valuable to Apple. Control of their own data, control of their own user experience. That's something that they want. And if right now Google wins if Apple wins, because Google makes, I think, still more money off iOS than they make off Android. And it's never good if your competitor benefits from the success of your platform. You'd much rather want them to compete off the strength of their own platform.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm going to field this one down to Matt. So Dominic asks, will Apple allow developers to add widgets in Notification Center in the near future?
I have seen no sign of it. I have heard nothing about it. No developer has come to me with any tips about hey, look at this hook. Isn't this interesting? None of my sources have said anything to me about those APIs becoming accessible to developers. So that's all I can say at the moment. No, probably not. Not anytime soon.
Rene, am I ever going to get my widgets?
No, I think Apple has made it really clear that they want you living in apps. I mean, a lot of phones, the home screen itself is so fun that you can actually have your live wallpaper and your glanceable information. And Apple basically gives you a launcher. They want you to open up the home screen, pick an app, and go into it. And what widgets do is they take data out of the app and stick it on the home screen. I think there might be a future where Apple starts to let apps be more actionable inside other apps, but I don't foresee a future where Apple will create a data layer like Dashboard in Mac OS X, which I'm not sure of the statistics, but I don't think it's got such a high user rating, and I don't think Apple wants you to live in a dashboard layer on iOS.
Why? if I may ask? Like, you say that, but what would be the benefit to not allowing us to live, like, sticking us in apps?
Well, it's the same thing. Like on your Mac, do you use Dashboard a lot?
Never.
Yeah.
I don't. If it was though, again, I don't use anything that caught, like, again, one extra click for me. It's more work. If it was already on my home screen, like just having, things that would be more easily accessible and movement out, I'll deal with, but I'm not going to open something up.
Well, I wrote an article about this thing, that to remind geeks that iOS wasn't made for us. And I think that's one of the truths of this, is that dashboard and widgets are geeky features, and there'll be a lot of geeks that appreciate it. But my mom and my sister, their iPhone plays music, takes photographs, and makes phone calls. It actually makes phone calls. And Apple spends a lot of time hiding, like the fast app switcher, hiding notification center, hiding all this stuff away from my mom so she doesn't get intimidated by it. And maybe eventually they'll make some form of API accessible, but I don't think it's high on their priorities. And I know Matt and Mark will laugh when I say this, but remember Jaws's list of things and how far down he said cut and paste was? I think that if cut and paste was that far down, I can't imagine where notifications are for Apple. So notifications, but widgets.
Now, I will say this. I know what you mean, Georgia, and I think that they're wrong to a degree in this. I mean, I don't think that I think that they have the user's best interest in mind, but I think that there are other ways to go. And one of the things that I really did like about Jelly Bean and do like about Jelly Bean is their revamped notification system, because it's quite good. It takes that kind of paradigm where it's like, as Rene mentioned, pulling information out of an app and keeping a user out of the app, but it flips it around, and instead of pulling the user out of the app, it just provides them with a conduit. There are two major things that are new with their notification system. You can deep link to portions of an app. So you can tell them, hey, you have a new check-in, right, in Foursquare. So instead of opening the Foursquare app and then going into the app and then tapping on your check-ins and then seeing your new ones,
it's almost
you can deep link. Well, it's very much like the notifications you get on the home screen, right? Yeah. So you swipe them and they bring you into an app. So it's a deep link. But they bring that to the notification center. So you can, if you get a new email or if you get a new notification, you tap on it, it not only brings you down into the app, but it also brings you 2 layers down, saving you 2 or 3 taps, right? So I think the deep linking is very cool. I think that's something that Apple could implement. Yeah, and they're already doing it on the home screen. They're just not doing it in the notification center so much.
Well, look at Siri, too. I mean, there's tons of widgets in Siri. Right. There's even more than notification center. It's just Apple's providing Siri as the interface, not the home screen.
But the other thing they're doing is also pulling out glanceable data into that notification center that allows you to either take action on something or glance, get a glanceable piece of information without having to open the app. So it's something that you would resent opening the app for. Like if you get an email, you're like, why are you telling me what the first line of the email is, right? Yeah. So you resent having to open your phone and hit your email and wait for it to load and then look at it, right?
Or Georgia just jailbreaks.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
I hate that. That just pisses me off.
But if you give it to them in the notification system, they whip it down, okay, cool, and then they can go away. Or they whip it down and they go, delete, real quick. Whatever the case may be.
Yes.
But I think there are some good things about that. So I agree with you that there's a need to take that further. I do also agree with Rene, however, that that's not their priority and that their priority is simple first. So I think it'll be a while.
Yeah, like as long as it took me to get cut and paste. Mark, you agree?
Yeah, I don't see home screen widgets like they have on Android coming anytime soon. I mean, there's always been this thing about iOS, how it's a simple operating system, slide to unlock, you have your row of icons. I mean, they didn't even let you pick your own background wallpaper until 3.2 on the iPad and 4 on the iPhone.
That's so true.
There's always been, this consistency of the user interface. And I think that consistency stems to Notification Center, where you have your notifications, then you have stocks and weather. The interface, like if you're talking about putting widgets in Notification Center, swiping through this long list of widgets is completely Google and totally on Apple. And in terms of, like Matt was talking about, hooks for widgets in the OS, like when iOS 5 first came out, like in the betas, there were some hooks for something like that. Where a few developers, they're called like Wii apps. That's how Apple coded them internally. They were able to get like their little sample apps working in the notification center. Nothing that major, but looks like they were definitely, thinking of it. And then I remember there was some patent about widgets in the notification center like setting. But will it ever come into fruition? I don't see that happening.
Well, there we go. Guest one asks, Rene,
Yes.
how soon can iOS users expect Google Maps to hit the App Store? And I'll ask myself, and will Apple just hold off on saying okay to them?
No, I don't think. Well, let me answer the second question first. I don't think Apple could refuse entry for Google Maps in the App Store.
Could they not refuse entry, but just hold off on accepting it because there's such a long queue of apps they have to go through first?
No, see that's what I'm getting to. I think that because of Google Voice, the thing is so. Google Voice was such a clusterfuck for Apple in many ways. They don't want that kind of attention. They don't want FTC. They don't want DOJ. They don't want the government in their App Store business. And subsequent to that, Google Apps, I mean, Gmail couldn't get on initially, and now there's a Gmail app. I can't say Google has carte blanche, but it would be incredibly hard for Apple to refuse entry of any Google app onto the App Store. Now, Google is getting better. Google originally didn't make great App Store apps anyway. They're getting better at making it. How long it will take them to build it, I don't know. Google may not rush just because there will be people who are upset that there's Apple Maps and not Google Maps, and Google might enjoy them being upset for a while. So it might take them some time to fill that need. But I think that it will come, and I think people who are very fond of Google... I should back up for a second. Google Maps on Android is so much better than Google Maps on iOS. Google could do a very good business if they put Google Maps back on iOS, and they'd want to because they want that data.
Right. So, Mark, I'm going to ask this. If Google makes an app before iOS 6 comes out, they make the app for the App Store, put it out on the same day. Do you think that Apple will approve it, or they'll wait so that, because people would jump to it? Again, if they came out on the same time, until I get used to, our apps, what do you think Apple will deal with that?
Are you talking about like in terms of the government issues, DOJ, whatever, like they submit it and it gets accepted the first day, or they want to release it the same day?
Do you think that
iOS
Apple
6?
would, like say that they even release it 2 weeks beforehand, just in waiting for, do you think that Apple would hold off for as long as they legally could? Wouldn't that be great for Google and really screw up Apple's plan?
Well, people using Google Maps on the iPhone through this, purported Google Maps App Store app that they create themselves and release, and like you're saying 2 weeks before iOS 6, right? They're still using it on the iPhone. People are going to the App Store to download the app. It has zero loss for Apple. Apple put their maps out. They want the default user experience to be their Apple Maps. And like in my tests, I've been using it for a while. It's so much better than Google Maps. I'm really enjoying like the cartography, the flyover, and whatnot. But, I don't think there's any disadvantage to Apple for them approving it immediately. I think the only disadvantage for them is having another clusterfuck, as Rene says, like they had with Voice. So I think there's no downside for anyone here. There's no real upside. It's just the users getting what they want. And the best part for Apple, it's the users getting what they want on the iPhone. So I don't think it really affects them.
Well, I'm going to throw another one at you. So Ryan Crook says, any chance the new status bar is a design that fully gets shown off with a larger iPhone and can't be fully appreciated yet?
I don't think there's really a new status bar. I mean, it's just transparent. I don't think it has anything to do with the taller iPhone. It's just a new design decision. I think it looks pretty good. I think that's reading into it too much. But no doubt there's going to be a taller iPhone. I just don't think the status bar, as we see it right now in iOS 6, has anything to do with it.
I do have a theory on that. I don't think that's... I think that it's equal. This is 100% wild goose, because I think that it's an equal chance that what I'm about to say is 100% crap. And it's the same exact chance that it's valid. So don't take my word for this. But the color changing bar, it changes based on tint of a 1 pixel line underneath the top of or underneath the title bar. So it's the bottom row of pixels underneath the status bar that controls the color. So my theory on this is that what if that color is allowed to be controlled by the developer to letterbox or pillar box their apps with a pleasing matching color to the title bars of their interface until they can redesign their app to take advantage of the full length or width of the phone. So perhaps until they get their app iPhone 6, 5 ready, they can use a color instead of just black on the sides of their app.
That's
interesting.
Yeah, I agree with your theory in terms of like that's something that Apple would do. I just don't know if the status bar being transparent right now on these iPhone 4, 4S, 3GS builds, leads into that. I mean, I actually think that's a really good idea that Apple made.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think that there's any hard evidence of that. It's just something
right. I don't think it's a hint at that, but I think that's something that Apple may well do. I mean, it sounds logical. It sounds like a good idea. Another thing you have to think about, like with the taller phone, if they do letterbox or they letterbox like either on the top or the bottom, do they make the screen, like the interface of this third-party App Store app, go towards the bottom near the home button? Or do they, like for easy home button clicking access? Or do they make it go towards the top for easy notification center access? Or do they do top and bottom? How do they play it? I think there's so many ways they can go.
I mean, they had auto layout up on the big slide for iOS, and they've had that in Lion, I believe, on OS 10, and that'll take a while to implement, but that might factor in as well.
Yeah. People read a lot into that. I mean, I don't know how new that was in iOS 6, or if that really points to a larger screen. I know a lot of people were talking about like, hey, this confirms a larger screen. I don't know about that. I think it's a coincidence. I mean, I have no doubt there's going to be a taller, larger screen. I just don't see any evidence for it in the wild right now.
Dude, if it stops Notification Center from covering up my back button, it will be worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I definitely think they need to fix that. I mean, if they push it down slightly, I think the new notifications setup that shrinks your interface, that pushes it downwards, would be a very welcome thing.
Yeah.
Does 6 do that, or are you saying that's something you want?
It would be.
No, it doesn't do it right now.
No. Yeah, that's another interesting thing. Another interesting thing is like people have been talking about, like Rene did all his mock-ups. Like, how do they do it? Do they make apps that span the entire length of the new screen, or do they leave extra features out there? Do they leave like a bigger status bar with notifications on top, like at all times? Do they have like a multitasking feature on the bottom? I mean, like from what I've seen, it's custom build of iOS that takes full advantage of the taller screen. Like all the apps are reprogrammed, redesigned. Like Apple's apps, at least, are they span the entire screen. There's nothing proprietary that stays there. The new screen takes advantage of. I guess Apple just wants the screen to be bigger and for developers to take full advantage of it.
Well, you get UI table view and pull to refresh for free now.
Right. Like here's what I was thinking. If you have a UI table view app that uses all of Apple's proprietary user interface elements that they provide to you, why does your app have to be letterboxed? If you have like Twitter for iPhone, maybe that's not a good example. How about
Twitter for iPhone uses a web view inside of a shell, so that's not a good example. But yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, you're definitely right that like there's going to be a good percentage of apps, 60% of apps that that use a table view or a similar setup, use standard Apple elements, just reskinned. That will work day one.
Can we agree, though, that there's going to have to be there's going to have to be the FaceTime or the Siri feature that Apple shows off in, like iOS 6 is not done. There will be some commercial-ready, demo-ready feature that they're going to save for the phone display.
Well, I'll ask that question at the end.
Okay.
Because I want to actually know what everyone is thinking or hoping will be the extra feature that will be in maybe for them. But until then, I want to ask you, Rene. Matt asks, what happens to the sat nav when you lose data connection? Does it stop routing or stop displaying the map?
So as far as we can tell, based on what Apple announced at the keynote, it looks like it's live, like online map data. So they're pulling it from a server and displaying it, which means similar to how Telenav works now, you would have a certain amount cached locally, but if you deviate too much from the path, or you go beyond what was locally cached, you would lose the map. You'd still have a little dot, but would no longer be able to render the map tiles. I don't know how much of an advantage Vector gives them, but we kept hearing that Apple might be working on some sort of passive download system where they would, in the background, when you're on Wi-Fi, pull map data and other data like podcast data, any large binary, large object data, and keep that cached on your machine so that you would have a greater buffer. But it's not going to be like Navigon or like TomTom where you have gigabytes of maps on board.
Great. Mark, can you say that in English?
Oh, damn.
No. It's good. Just beyond my
Can you say that in non-Canadian, please?
Have Matt do it. No, can you repeat the question?
No, I was just joking. Beyond my technical skills.
It's going to be like Google Maps, not like Navigon or TomTom.
Right. They're all going to be locally.
From what I've heard,
It's not all local. Yeah, go ahead.
you need an internet connection to get the full experience, but you will be able to use the GPS-related features without an internet connection.
Which is pretty much what happens now with Google Maps.
Right.
Are you under NDA, Matt? Are you
Yep.
a developer?
Yeah.
You haven't seen his version of Airhorn yet?
They're going to pull all your apps, Matt.
Hey, I said from what I've heard.
Well, no, but I mean that's fair based on what they showed off. I mean, Apple never claimed that they're gonna. If you have offline maps, that is gigabytes of data. Anyone who tried to download the 1.5 gigabyte Navigon app knows that's big business. They're not going to just shove those maps on everyone's phones.
See, Google did it very smart. Like with their, I don't know if it's out yet, but you know how they announced the offline maps in their version of Flyover? You pick your destination that you want to go to. Hey, like I know I'm going to be offline for this certain amount of time, and these are the places I need. And you could download and cache certain directions and turn by turn for certain places for a certain time. So I think Google did it really smart, and I think Apple should, take a similar approach for offline maps.
And Apple has not announced anything like that yet. So
yeah.
Right. Rene, you think we have time for one more question, and then
sure.
go to the main question that I really want to ask everyone?
Absolutely.
Oh, God. Okay, here we go. I'm going to send this to anyone that can answer this. Matt asks, can you go into a bit more detail about the linking of phone numbers to Apple IDs and how that works with FaceTime? Go ahead, anyone.
I can do it for the people who don't want to talk under NDA.
Oh, I can talk. I mean, they did announce it.
Yeah, they showed.
They didn't show the details.
Matt's like, please don't pull my apps. I saw this already. Yes.
Well, if you look at the iOS page, the iOS 6 preview page, it pretty much spells it out for you. But I'll let Mark take this one. Go ahead.
So basically what they do is, like, everyone has this Apple ID who wants to use iMessage or FaceTime or iCloud and whatnot on their iOS devices. And basically what Apple does is that they can tie, just like they can tie a substitute email address to your main Apple ID address, they can now tie a phone number. And what that does is, if someone sends an iMessage to your telephone number, it will come to your iPhone and also go to your iPad or iPod Touch, and the phone number text or whatnot will come to your iPad as well, because your iPad has the same email as the iPhone, and that phone number is now linked to that email. Now, the way Apple described it on their online literature, like Matt was saying, and in the keynote, is if you buy a new iPhone, like, you can slide to unlock whatever, put in your iCloud details, there'll be a merging page for that. But if you have already gone through the process of that, you're not setting up it as a brand new phone, like I did when I set up my iOS 6 beta devices. Basically, when I had both emails on both devices, and then the phone number registered as an iMessage number on my iPhone, the iPad put up a pop-up when I opened up the Messages settings tab, and it said, hey, we recognize your phone number from your iPhone is tied to the same email tied to this iPad. Would you like to receive phone number iMessages to the iPad? Like, I clicked yes, and, we went from there, and it works great, actually. It's very fast. And another thing you can do now is you can set your caller ID on your iPad as a phone number that's linked to your email. So it's not email caller ID only. It could be a phone number caller ID, like you could always do on the phone. And of course, that's the same on the iPod Touch. And this entire same process that I explained works exactly the same way for FaceTime. And currently, you can't do the phone number merging to a Mac. Like, even though my email address that's on my phone and my iPad are on this Mac, I can't get phone number and phone number text and FaceTime as on the Mac. Apple hasn't enabled that yet. So right now it's iOS only, but I'm sure maybe when Mountain Lion launches, or maybe when iOS 6 launches, they'll bring that to the Mac too. So it works great, and I've been waiting for this for a really long time. It makes everything so much more convenient.
What, Mark doesn't get an English thing on that, Georgia?
Yeah.
No, I was following with that.
Okay.
Go.
So part
Rene,
is
do you want to,
It just works. Your iPhone, your iPad, but not your Mac.
It's magic.
Yeah. It's auto magic everywhere except your Mac. It just like you'll get your iMessages on any of your iOS devices, but the Mac is either not done yet or pending.
Right. Someone's saying that I'm biased against you in the chat room.
She's actually at an angle against me.
So when FaceTime came out, they had that FaceTime Santa Claus ad. With Siri, They had the Santa Siri ad. Before, like when I started hearing about the 3D stuff or whatever, it takes a lot of processing power. I figured, hey, maybe they make the 3D flyover exclusive to this next generation iPhone. You have your Santa Claus ad browsing people's houses in 3D, where I'm going to drop the
3D.
gifts off. Yeah. Or now, like, we're hearing that this new phone might have NFC capabilities with Passbook or whatnot. So maybe, Santa could be going to buy the toys with his iPhone.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Look, I get disconnected for a second, and I come back and we're talking about Santa. What the frick happened?
No, we're talking about what Apple's commercial is going to be for the iPhone 5.
Oh, gotcha.
And what killer feature would be great to have?
I think Mark's absolutely right, because and I think I've said this before, Apple didn't do multitasking. They did Skype, Pandora, and TomTom, and they're not going to do NFC the way people do, like just put an NFC chip in and say, have at it. They'll say, look, pay for things at Starbucks.
Explain NFC, Rene, before you...
So NFC is near field communications. It's a variety of RFID, which is a radio frequency ID. It means that you have a passive radio in your phone. So think of it like Bluetooth, but much more energy efficient and sort of useful in more direct communications. If you have a PayPass, MasterCard, or a Visa, that's NFC, basically. It's RFID. So Apple's going to let you wave your phone and pay for things. Maybe. I have to keep pressing. We don't know this yet. Passbook looks like a way that maybe they could implement this. Mark's laughing at me, so I might have got that really wrong.
No.
Was that okay?
No,
Mark?
but I think that the Apple won't go, oh, we have NFC in your iPhone. They'll go, look, you can use your iPhone to pay for Starbucks or pay for stuff at Target. They'll make it
the
very
word NFC will never be in their materials. Like it may show up in one of the bullet lines, or bullet points, but they'll like tap to pay. I think is something that they'll use.
Yeah.
Right. That's where Santa bought the gifts, and then he uses.
Ho, 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 I forgot one gift. To be like,
and to get there. So what, Matt, I'll ask you, what killer feature do you think that Apple could add, to the show to make iOS 6 even better?
I don't know. I don't know if I have anything for you here. I haven't really thought about it that much. I think that they've nailed most of the basic stuff. So I think that if you're going to see anything, it's going to be using a piece of technology in the phone to great advantage. That's typically what they do. So if there's going to be a marquee feature that they add when the iPhone comes out, it's going to be something that utilizes a piece of hardware on the camera in a unique way. That's always the way they do it. So if they were to introduce like a paybook of some sort, that's definitely something that would, that's the time I would do it. If they were going to introduce a piece of hardware with NFC capabilities, it would be really, so they're not going to put anything in it they're not going to use. So we know that. So if they put NFC in there, it's going to be used somehow. So how they use it is going to be interesting. But, I definitely have a feeling they're going to be waiting on the payments thing to give people time to get acclimated, but they very well could spring it. It just depends. I would say if you get word that Apple is installing NFC hardware in Apple stores, then start thinking seriously about Apple introducing a payment system. So stay tuned to 9 to 5 Mac or something.
As soon as Gurman puts that live, we'll all know.
Afraid of the retina scan. Rene, what would be that feature for you?
So, I always like to look at things in context and in precedent. And Apple has been doing several things repeatedly over the last few iPhones. They introduced video with the 3GS. They made it 720p with the 4, 1080p with the 4S. I don't think there's much further they can push that. No one's putting a 4K camera on a phone, maybe except for Nokia. They also have done these things for the last 2 years where they did really big accessibility ads. So FaceTime let you sign over your iPhone. Siri let you, even if you were blind, you could have Siri read you text messages. They showed off kiosk mode as part of WWDC, so it's hard to see where they would take that with their next ad. I agree with Matt and with Mark that Passbook would make a fantastic demo if it's installed in a big retailer like Starbucks or like Target. But I think people aren't ready for it. I think that might be the iPhone 6 big demo. And I'm at a complete loss. The 4-inch screen will be impressive on its own just because it's finally a big hardware difference. But absent something that makes use of that big screen, I'm hard pressed to figure out what their wow moment is.
Yeah, so I'm not.
Sorry, Matt?
Streaming movie service.
Maybe.
Hell, you see, and I'm just hoping. I'm hoping that at some point I'm going to have a Kinect-like experience from the 7-inch iPad or something. Like that's just what I'm waiting for.
You want like gesture UI? You'll face the camera and wave your hand, and it'll do stuff.
They gotta get a kickstand in there first. If they don't have a kickstand, it's useless.
Yeah.
You can't wave your arms around something that's falling.
That's what I had always wanted from, and now I have to chuckle, but that's what I always wanted from my iPad. So I'm all good with that. That and it follow me around. I'm like, iPhone, come here.
Oh, auto mode. That's it. It's going to have anti-gravity. They'll be able to follow you around like an R2 unit.
Right. iDog.
That'd be a heck of a demo.
That's exactly it. So Rene, I think that we're pretty much running out of time. Is there anything that I have missed?
No, I think you nailed it. Should I wrap things up?
Please, if you could.
All right. Thank you very much. Mark, where can we find out more about you?
You can find out more about me at twitter.com/Marc Gurman and at 9toMyMac.com.
Matt, where can we find out more about you?
You can find out more about me in the various FBI criminal databases, your local post office, anywhere that criminals are indexed, and then also and also at thenextweb.com.
Nice. And Georgia, where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on Twitter at GeorgiaTIPB. Yes, still retro that way, and also on the website www.imore.com.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can email us at podcast@imore.com or just leave a comment on the show when it goes live. We are here each and every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, www.imore.com/live. And for all of our shows, check out mobilenations.com/shows. And that's it, Georgia. I think we're done.
Good. Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for coming onto the show. Very, very cool. I didn't thank you, Rene.
Before we switch gears, I just want to thank Audible for sponsoring today's show. You can go to audiblepodcast.com/imore and get a free audiobook download. In fact, I encourage you to do so. It helps support the iMore show. It gets you a great free book. It's a win-win situation. If you're not familiar with Audible, Audible is books brought to glorious audio life. They have fantastic readers, sometimes the author, often well-known voice actors, sometimes well-known actors, period. They read the books to you. And this is important because, for example, I spend all day staring at computer screens. My eyes get tired. It's very difficult for me to fit in reading a lot of books. But while I'm working, I can very easily listen to them. In fact, because I can listen to them, that's the only way I manage to get through books anymore. I used to have long commutes. It used to take me an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to work every day. I used to listen to audiobooks voraciously while I traveled. Now I work at home, but I can listen to books just as voraciously while I work. They have recent bestsellers. They have classics. You can get anything that you watch on TV that is based on a book. More often than not, you can find it on Audible. Game of Thrones, Hunger Games, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. It is all there. A couple of months ago, I listened to Tony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential and Raw. He's famous, well-known celebrity cook from the Food Network and Travel Network. He does No Reservations. He used to do a cook's tour or a chef's tour. And they were amazing. And they were absolutely amazing, not just to read, but to listen to hear in his own words. And that is a feeling that doesn't go away. Every time you listen to an Audible book, whether it's a book about Apple, whether it's a book about Google, whether it's a book about technology, or just a fictional book that you've always wanted to hear, whether it's a book about Apple or just a great novel that you've always wanted to read but didn't have time for, there's time to listen to it. So check out Audible. Check out audiblepodcast.com/imore. Once again, you support the show. You get a free audiobook download. Everybody's happy.